Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi ajma'in wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tamassaka bihadihim ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Al-Kaba'ir al-Tasi'a wa Sittun. Al-Iyasu min Rawhillahi ta'ala wal-Qunut. The author says major sin number 69 is the exact opposite of major sin number 68. Or if not the exact opposite, but it's directly connected. And he says, Sufyan, he says, Al-Iyasu. He says it's to lose hope from the mercy of Allah. It's to give up, and it's to quit, and it's to despair the mercy and the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yesterday, Sheikh Safraz, we mentioned there's a major sin, 68, Al-Amnu min makrillahi ta'ala. It's for you to feel safe and secure from what Allah has planned and decreed. For you to feel safe and secure from Allah's wrath and from His punishment. For you to feel safe and secure from Allah sealing your heart. For you to feel safe and secure against what Allah Azza wa Jal may do or has done, whatever the case is, however you word it. And this one here, he says, is for a person to lose hope from Allah's mercy. To totally what? Give up. It's over. And to despair. And we're going to explain this with a bit more detail, so don't get too happy too fast, Sufyan. The author, he says here, قال الله تعالى إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. He quotes the first ayah here, which is from Surah Yusuf, that no one despairs from Allah's mercy except for the people who are infidels, those who are faith rejectors, those who are disbelievers. They're the only ones who can despair from Allah's mercy and have no thought, no desire, no hope whatsoever for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He then quotes the next ayah. The author rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, هُوَ الَّذِي يُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثَ مِن بَعْدِ مَا قَنَطُوا. Allah says here in Surah Shura, it is Allah. He is the one, يُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثَ, who sends down the rain, who sends down the water from the sky, من بعد ما قنطوا, after the people have lost hope, if they've despaired. The next ayah he says here, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. The ayah from Surah Al-Zumar, in which Allah Azza wa Jalla says, what is translated to mean, tell my slaves, O Muhammad, explain to them, address them, announce to them, tell my slaves who are righteous and pious, who fear me. No, it says, الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ. Tell my slaves who have wronged themselves in abundance, who have transgressed the boundaries, who went beyond the level and the limit which they were supposed to go beyond. The slaves who aren't so good, who aren't so pious, who aren't so righteous, even though they have good hearts, they have fear of Allah, they feel sad, they have regret for their sins and their disobedience. Go tell them, do not despair from Allah's mercy. Do not despair, do not give up from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first hadith of the chapter, the author quotes, he says, وَقَالَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ لَا يَمُوتَنَّ أَحْدُكُمْ إِلَّا وَهُوَ يُحْسِنُ الظَّنَّ بِاللَّهِ تَعَالَى. As the hadith in Sahih Muslim, in which the Prophet ﷺ says, reported by Jabir, none of you should die except that he has good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. None of you should die. In other words, if you die, how are you going to do something or not do something? What's meant is that if you become very sick, you become very, very old, you're on your deathbed, a tragedy, something that's happened to you, and it's very likely that it's going to be fatal, mortally wounded, whatever the case may be, fatally wounded. Everybody understand this? Whatever the case may be, you're very old, you're about to die, you must have good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not have bad thoughts of Allah. Now we'll explain that with ta'ala in a second. What's important here is that this says, min rawhillah. Sometimes it says Rawhullah. Another time it says Rahmatullah. Or for a person to not to hope for Allah, as we read yesterday from Surah Yunus. Inna alladhina la yarjuna liqa'ana. They don't hope, they don't look forward to our meeting us. And there are other expressions as well. What's important is for the slave to feel totally safe against Allah, have no fear of Allah whatsoever. Period. And then we explained that that's kufr akbar, that's major disbelief. And then have another extreme in which the slave has no hope for Allah whatsoever. He does not look forward to anything called Jannah, to anything called maghfirah, to Allah helping him or supporting him. Allah can't help me. Allah can't support me. Allah can't save me. And that is also the other far side of extremism. As far as if someone believes that Allah does have mercy and that there is something called Jannah and Allah does forgive the sins, but he's burnt himself so much. His iman is scorched. He's disobeyed Allah for such a long time, over and over and over and over and over and over again, the same sin, the same addiction, and he says it's hopeless. My affair is hopeless. Allah is not going to have mercy on me. Then that is a major sin. And that is from the Kaba'ir. Him not doubting Allah's ability to forgive, him not rejecting the attribute of Allah, but him saying that my affair is done. There's no way. I'm not going to stop drinking. I've been drinking for 50 years. I'm not going to stop drinking now. I've done so much harm from being a drunkard. My wife, my children, my work, my job, my career. I had the ability to go to school, go to college, get a scholarship. I threw all of that down the drain for a bottle. So there's no mercy that's coming to me. I'm old, I'm thin, and I'm weak. That's one thing. Everybody understand this? That's one thing. Also, with regards to not having a proper understanding of the mercy of Allah, just like dua, you can ask Allah for anything, beg Allah for anything. However, there are things that Allah has taught us that just do not happen. And there are things that Allah has taught us that will not happen, such as a very old man begs Allah and says, Allah, make me young again. Turn me into a teenager again. Does Allah have the ability to do it? Of course He does. But that isn't something that Allah has taught His slaves that He does. That clearly goes against His natural way that He created things. And the old man does not return to a young man. It just doesn't happen like that. So you asking Allah for that, to give you something which is totally against the sunnah of Allah, is not considered to believe in Allah and His dua and His power. No, it's considered to be disrespectful. And the ulama, the people of knowledge, they say, huwa min suwar al-i'tida'i fi dua. It is from the ways of you transgressing the boundaries when you make dua. There's an etiquette when you make dua. Certain things that you should not say and should not ask for when you make dua. And from those things is to ask Allah to do something mimma jarat al-'ada, that the 'ada, the normal universal way of things, does not take place like that. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that. If a man is trying to have a child for many years and he doesn't have a child, he says, oh, Allah, give me a child. That's one thing. Everybody understand this? It's possible for there to be a reason why you can't have a child. You, your wife, or you together, there's a reason. But a person is gray-bearded and he says, oh, Allah, make me 17 again. Everybody clear on this? That is something that just doesn't what? Just doesn't happen. And there are other ways of oppressing yourself and transgressing the boundaries and oppressing others in dua as well. We did a lecture on this maybe a year ago. Perhaps we'll do it again. Very important. Many Muslims, they do this. They make transgression in their dua. Khairan, inshallah. Or some Muslims, there's an issue and there's an affair in which they still have hope in, but someone else may say that the affair is hopeless. Or the other person may say you need to move on, walk away, save yourself the suffering. But the person who wants this thing may say, what? No one despairs from Allah says except for the what? The disbelieving people. So therefore I have faith and I have conviction that Allah will answer my dua, Allah will give it to me, and Allah has the ability to do it. So one man's conviction may be another man's obsession. One man's dedication may be another man's, you're saying you're transgressing the boundaries. It's not going to happen. What's the likeliness of this happening? So that's relative and that's subjective. To totally not believe in it and reject it is clear kufr. Everybody understand this? To just give up and quit from Allah forgiving you and having mercy or blessing you with something could be a major sin. Everybody clear on this? So that's a proper understanding of that. And if it's something which is highly unlikely, it does not mean that a person has despaired from Allah's mercy, min rawhillah, min rahmatillah. If he says, you need to walk away from that situation. Just do khalas, ya akhi. Find something else. It doesn't mean that he's despaired from Allah's mercy. Nor does it mean that the one who says, I'm going to wait and I'm going to be patient is what? Misguided. Rather is tomato and what? Tomato. He sees something and believes in. The other person says that it's unlikely. Everybody understand this? With the condition that it isn't something which is customarily impossible. With that condition. The example that we made is for a man who's 90 years old to say, oh, Allah, make me 18 again. Is it impossible with Allah's power? No. But in the custom of the people, the day-to-day life for hundreds and thousands of years, it hasn't what? It hasn't happened. Everybody clear on this? Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. It says here in the footnotes, the Muhaqqiq, he says here, he says, وأخرج عبد الرزاق في المصنف وفي التفسير وابن المنذر في التفسير وابن أبي الدنيا في التوبة والطبراني في المعجم الكبير وابن جرير في التفسير عن ابن مسعود قال أكبر الكبائر 4 الإشراك بالله والأمر من مكر الله والقنوط من رحمة الله واليأس من روح الله. قال ابن كثير في تفسيره وهو صحيح إليه بلا شك، وصوب وقفه الدارقطني في العلل. فهذا تصريح من ابن مسعود أن الأمر من مكر الله من الكبائر بل من أكبرها، وورد نحوه عن ابن عباس مرفوعا كما تراه في جزء البرديجي، وهو الملحق الثاني في ناشرتنا هذه، والأشبه وقفه كما قال ابن كثير. فالواجب أن يكون العبد بين الرجاء والخوف، ويغلب الرجاء في الشدة والخوف في الرخاء، وعليه فالأمر من مكر الله من الكبائر بالكتاب وآثار السلف. وقد ذكرت هذه الكبيرة في منظومة الحجاوي، أو وقد ذكرت هذه الكبيرة في منظومة الحجاوي. He mentions a narration here of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that's collected by Imam Ibn Kathir, yani, with the sanad going back to the earlier people of tafsir, such as Abdul Razak, such as Ibn Jarir, such as Ibn Abi Dunya, and others. That Ibn Mas'ud said he says the greatest of greater sins, the greatest of major sins, Akbarul Kaba'ir. The greatest of major sins are 4. The first, he said, Al-Ishraku Billah, is associating partners with Allah's worship. Number 2, he says, Wal-Amnu min makrillah, is to feel safe against what Allah has plotted and planned. Number 3, Wal-Qunutu min rahmatillah, he says, and to lose hope from Allah's mercy, to despair. He then says, Wal-Ya'su min rawhillah, and this is a very challenging translation here, because the word qunut and yes are very symbolic, or synonymous, especially in English. Rawhullah and rahmatullah. What's important is some of the ulama, they say al-qunut is for a person to give up trying. And they may say that al-yas or al-yas, they may say that means not to believe in it and it's gone, no way, impossible. And there's a difference. In which a person may say, I believe that we can win the game, but I'm not willing to try it. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I have no more fight left in me. I physically quit, but I do have the faith that we can win. You try, but me, I can't fight anymore. Everybody understand this? And the second person says, we what? It's impossible to win. It's totally, we can't win anymore. Everybody understand the difference? Khairan, inshallah. So this is the statement of Ibn Mas'ud. That clearly proves that it's from the major sins. The Muhaqqiq, he then says, that which is mandatory is for the servant of Allah to have a balance. You have to fear Allah and hope for Allah. Hope for Allah and also fear Him. Now, one asks the question, which one should be stronger? Which of the two is stronger? You have 2 hands, naam? Except for those of us who are, what? Ambidextrous. Most of us have a stronger hand. We're more coordinated with one hand. If you're a southpaw, you're better with the left hand than the right. If you're orthodox, then what? With the right hand. And there are a few people that can have equal strength with both hands. And then there are a few people who have what? A few fighters who have the ability to knock you out with what? The left or the right. But most of us have a stronger punch, a stronger hand. So which of the two should be stronger? Your fear of Allah or your hope of Allah? Should it be 60-40? Should it be 50-50? Which of the two should be the stronger? What should be your right hand? What do you guys think? Have more hope for Allah and less fear of Allah. Tayyip. Anyone else?
During your young age, the fear of Allah should be higher. And I guess when you're closer to death, in the sense that you're old and you're in a state of sickness, then the hope should be more compared to fear.
Says here, Abu Bakr says that when you're in your youthly years, when you're young and strong, have more fear of Allah. And when you're older, have more hope for Allah. He then says, or when you're sick, you're about to die, have more hope for Allah. Why is this?
So when you're young, you have more fears that dissuade the person from doing wrong things.
When you're young, have more fear because it puts you away from doing wrong things. Okay?
And when you're old, you're able to do less things, so you have more hope.
You're able to do less things. You can't move as much. You don't have as much stamina and speed and ability, vigor and energy, so have more hope. Tell you, there's a few more very important pieces here. In other words, when you're younger, not only do you have more energy, but you're less wise. You're more prone to haste. You're more prone to being short-sighted and only seeing things narrowly, thinking about today in the moment, being impulsive. And when you're older, you're supposed to be more wise, you're supposed to be a sage now. Those gray hairs on your head and your beard are supposed to teach you things, not like this, like that. Take your time, plan, look for the future, invest, and don't just live off of the moment. Don't be impulsive. Everybody understand this? So that's in general, that's correct. However, there's something else that you guys are missing, which is very important. And that is Abu Bakr, who said when a person is older, when a person is dying, they're very sick, they're very ill, you should have more mercy. The ulama of Islam, they say no. They say when a person is sick and about to die, he should have no fear of Allah, period. And he should have all hope because it's of no benefit. He's dying, he's on a deathbed, there's nothing haram that he can perform or fall into. And that's the purpose of fearing Allah. It's to prevent you from the bad deeds, wicked deeds. Everybody understand this? As far as when a person's about to die, then they say what? That's it. Because what?
You're not committing else. You can't.
That's the only thing that he can look forward to. That's the only thing that's the only chance that he has is Allah's mercy. And no more what? Fear. And him having the fear that Allah is going to punish me, destroy me, he can't get up and make tawbah. He can't do nothing. So therefore they say that's a waste of time. And it also could be a means of disrespect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khairan, inshallah. What's important is that the believer has to have a balance. Some say it should be equal. Some say it should be a bit more, 60-40 perhaps. And some may say that when you're younger, more fear, and older, more hope. One may say if a person is young, he also needs the hope for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Due to the fact that he's going to fall into things. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be foolish and unwise. You're going to make these actions. You're going to perform these things which aren't based off of wisdom. And if you don't have no hope of Allah, then you may commit suicide. You may end your life, as many young people do. Just the other day, or the famous, Rock? Link, He's just killed himself, hung himself. Everybody understand this? So this is a reality. Now, the question is now, Safraz, how can a person think about suicide and he knows this and he reads these things? That no matter what has happened to you, no matter what you did, Allah's mercy is bigger and greater. And you committing suicide is a manifestation of what? There's no point living anymore. It's over. It's done. I can't face it. I can't look at the people. They can't find out. Whatever the case may be. I'm tired of living. So that's a big problem with regards to suicide. And we know that's very rampant among many, many Muslims. When we were in Guyana, the president of the school, he spoke to me before I spoke to the kids that were Muslims, that were Christians, that were Hindus. He said, please don't forget to talk about suicide in your talk. Even though you're calling them to Islam, you're calling them Muslims to be good Muslims, to practice the sunnah, to seek ilm, but you have to talk about suicide, especially to the young girls, the women. He said it's rampant. He says they're committing suicide in abundance. As far as America, I don't think we have to talk about suicide in America, suicide rates. Pills, slitting the wrist, hanging yourself. It's unfortunate. And oftentimes it's based off of people not understanding this, and not reading this, and not reflecting upon this. Last but not least is the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, the author quotes hadith number 405, don't die unless you have, it says, إِلَّا وَهُ يُحْسِنُ الظَّنَّ بِاللَّهِ. You have good thoughts of Allah. What does this mean? Some of the people of knowledge, they say that you shouldn't die unless you have good actions. That you've made tawbah from the bad deeds, and you've stacked up, and you've amassed a good amount of good deeds. And if you had good thoughts of Allah, then that's what will be the case. Then you would do well. Everybody understand this? And others, they say, what we just explained, that when you're about to die, have good thoughts of Allah, don't think about fear. Only think about what? Hope. Allah is Ghafur Rahim. Allah is Al-Ghaffar. Allah is At-Tawwab. Allah is the one who covers the faults of His slaves. Allah's mercy is greater than anything that I could possibly do. Not for me to feel safe. Not for me to feel that I got a ticket or a place in Jannah. La, 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 la. But for a person only to have the hope of Allah because that's the last thing that he has. There's nothing else. Everyone understand this? Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. We ask Allah to keep us from being of those who despair from His mercy and lose hope from or lose hope of Allah Azza wa Jalla's blessings and His grace. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.